Hi there. We are happy to have you. This is the Cosmic Cruise. My name is Ben Kickler. I'm your host for today. I give you three principles, three objectives, and three methods, so three each. And the first one, the principles, it's supposed to give you simplicity. And the second one is the objectives. So objectives orientation, know what you're looking at, where you want to go. And the third one, the methods, that's the most hand-on part. So it's really about giving you angles, a handle on things. How can you start a tool set to start into the next year? So that is the aim for today. And I'd say, let's get into it. First part, three principles. That's basically things I've learned in recent years. I picked up habits and also I condensed it down. So it's a bit broad, but then there's also some examples for it to get you an understanding. First thing here is, digital. Digital can be just too much, too many opportunities, where to start. So my point here is really lower the barriers, do everything that helps, reduce and sandbox. So everything that helps you get started, most important, start, right? So that's why start smaller. First advice of the day, start smaller principle. How can we look at that in precision, or what should that mean to make it more tangible? There is this framework that most people know, most common options of expansion. That's not really new, but let's take a really brief look onto this. On the top right, we have the wholly owned subsidiary, something I already mentioned before, what's going on with Hubject also, but many other people do this. This is something where you have quite a high resource of committed resources, so you have to invest a lot. And but you get also a lot of control, so that's great. Nevertheless, you have to invest a lot. The next thing on the ladder is the joint venture, something many people look into, especially when they want to move into foreign markets, or if they want to tackle something they're not so sure about. So joint ventures are good to spread the risk and also to get a bit more powerful. Nevertheless, there's a few things they definitely do not add to you, and that is speed and flexibility. So those two features are something you might really want to consider when entering a high competitive new market, and therefore I'm not really convinced about that too much. Nevertheless, it's a solid option on the table. There are a few others. There's one I want to highlight now. The highlight one is the indirect export. Indirect export is many times overseen, and that's why I want to talk a bit about it. For example, there has been a European EV charging startup from Berlin growing massively already back in 2012, signing major deals with big OEMs. Some people know it. What I want to tell you is that if you have a website, it's not so complicated to actually reboot basically and get a global approach. So basically having a multilingual website and then work from there. So you can have a little bit of a startup attitude, get lots of local natives and work very efficiently with them as kind of sales leaders for local markets. Now, that is something that basically only works when you have a product-centered approach. But the great thing is that you have in-house knowledge that you increase, and it's easy, quantifiable, and it's scalable. So that's a very good value-benefit ratio or invest-benefit ratio that you get there potentially, and you can do that also, for example, with SaaS products, as long as they are in a global approach. That means you sell the same thing the same way everywhere. Now, of course, there are also limits to this. Just to mention it, I already said it helps if you have a physical product connected to it, kind of like a Shopify e-commerce approach. And also B2C doesn't hurt. But as I mentioned, it does also work a little bit with SaaS. And the same principle you could, by the way, also apply to a different concept, and that would be more the spearhead hires. So really looking to get somebody with deep access in the market you want to get to, and just also work with him basically as your bridgehead into that market. Now, that's the first principle to look at. The second principle that we're going to look at now is basically a company culture. Very important, hard to grasp, but something I really like to talk about. You have to fail faster. This is something urgently needed in order to grow your resilience as a company. So if you want to grow your company, and that's probably what you want to increase in size, then you need culture to basically to have a strong basis to start from. And that principle can help you to do that. And you can apply it very simple. Basically, this is about developing a habit of continuous development within your company. So that is something that's across units and sectors and therefore important. So let me look at what I did here. Analyze, assume, test, and iterate is the 4 phases that you then repeat in order to gain speed and focus. So what's great about this, you have the opportunity to get really guarded experimentation going on and therefore innovation. You increase the readiness to fail and to learn if you, of course, add the openness to really talk about and reflect about the learnings. That's, of course, important that you do it internally in your team and company. And then you can really increase focus, speed, and culture. Of course, there are some limits to this too. So yes, of course, it's not about failing. Yeah, it's about learning. But it's a title. And if you fail, then still the question is, how do you deal with those mistakes? And there's this nice little graph about different kinds of mistakes and how to deal with that. So that is something you can basically think about it. But innovation is something you want to start in your company. You need to start, especially when having a digital mindset. And so this is really a strong principle to narrow it down and to also steer your focus. Next one. This is kind of like my favorite, obviously, but this one is really talking brains. Yeah. So especially when you have limited resources and you're competing with large players, you have to outsmart the market. You have to really use your brains a lot because other people might have way deeper pockets and bigger reach and might even be more known. So you have to compete with them in a way that they do not expect. And that is really what this is about. This is about play smarter. And now, especially in the new mobility sector, there is potential, right? Most companies are actually slow and many are also old. So there is a window of opportunity and some people already take it. Therefore, that is something to consider for yourself and something you might also want to implement more in your business. And yes, of course, it helps to have some smart cats around. Nevertheless, let's look at this little matrix here. That's a basic one most people know. Again, it's kind of like a market fit. Basically, this is talking risk affinity, right? So the question is, where do you see yourself? I mean, yesterday, Bitcoin reached 20. It cracked the whatever mark. So this is a window of opportunity right now. There's lots of movement happening. Question is, how do you do that? And where is your risk affinity to talk more crypto? Where's your candle? And where's the support and resistance in the market? But on this little chart here on the top right, we have high risk and high potential. And on the top, bottom left, we have low potential and low risk. And this is, of course, something you want to consider. And there are a few different options here to deal with this. And the first one is, of course, you start in your quadrant and you grow your market share. You really use marketing, affiliate marketing, key account sales, maybe even aggressive growth to grow your market share. That's something you can do. And it makes sense if you know what you're doing. Nevertheless, not so exciting because not so much innovation going on there. So the second one, that's already a little bit more exciting because you expand in neighbor countries. That means you need to actually reflect on the culture of the target market and also on your value proposition, because you will probably need to adjust your value proposition continuously to also meet the needs of that new market that you're not really familiar with yet. Therefore, that's already more interesting because it teaches you as a company and it also holds the potential of reflecting your own heritage a little bit. Great. Now, next one on the topper part, this is where it's starting to become interesting because now we're talking innovation, new products in old markets. That is interesting because here we have a potential for business model innovation and also a potential for business model diversification. So that means there is also potential for scaling. That's why we already have a little bit more of a potential up here. Now, on the top quadrant, of course, this is where the rubber hits the road, as I like to say. This is kind of most interesting. Everybody knows it's Champions League, enter outside in. Think about it, though. If you want to beat the market, it might be smart, or it might at least be worth thinking about how could you become an asymmetric competitor. What does that mean? We will get into this a little bit later, a little bit more, but nevertheless, it is an interesting concept to think about. because it holds the potential of then developing outside in, but also from there inside out. So you have a very high alpha potential, so meaning maximum return of invest possible. Also, potential landslide effect. If you're really innovative, that's something we're going to talk about a bit more later with the disruption planner. Ooh. Anyway, so to cut that down, to bring that down, on the top right part, there's more sophisticated. On the bottom left is more the basic. And as I already mentioned a little bit in my first poll, to me, growth is kind of more simple and helps for product focused and B2C scale ups. Whereas if you B2B, you might want to have to really adjust your value proposition and think about it smart and outplay the market in order to kick in the right doors. Therefore, that's what I call sophisticated. And that is what we want to talk about today a bit more. And here we come to the 3 objectives for the sophisticated. To highlight the difference between digital and physical, just quickly, difference between growth and expansion. Again, for me, growth is really mostly about digital sales, marketing, technology, sector specific. There's automation possible, and that's a great thing. And on the expansion side, you have more digital innovation that's across sectors, but it's also a little bit more of invest you have to do there. It's not so easily to be automated. And then the objectives behind that are interesting, of course, for the growth. There is triggers. Basically, you can use profit of market readiness. So there is a void that you can fill. You can utilize economies of scale, sell a lot, be cheap and make a lot of money, or the other way around. And there is supply of consumer demand. So actually following the consumer, which is always a good thing to do. Then on the expansion side, there are really 3 things I want to highlight today, and that's the digitized value propositions, the strengthening of your value network, and occupied touch points. So to bring that down, to sum that up, really here we have the expansion objectives. First one, digitized value propositions. So really that means what is the potential of digital to innovate your value proposition? How can you really use digital to get different, to offer something that hasn't been offered before? Think about principles like access, personalization, unbundling, and integration, but also think about what is it that you shouldn't miss that some other people might be able to offer and kick you out of the market if you don't adjust your value proposition. So the thing about digitized value propositions really is that you want to understand also this is continuous, so you have to continuously develop it further, and you have to use the new tools at hand. Now, the second one is the original value networks. Original value networks, basically, how can you deliver this unseen value? Who do you need to do that? And what do you bring to the table when you want to convince these key players? So that is your network, and that's very important because without them, you will not be able to deliver. And with emerging markets and digitization, that is more and more partnerships. So third part is then the occupied touchpoint. Really, how do you occupy touchpoint? What are the hidden customer pains? What companies are maybe already there? How can you get your foot in the door? What are the interfaces, the companies that already are in place there? Maybe you want to get to know them. Maybe there's some players that are participants in the market that are worth taking a closer look at. And also, if you're really talking about yourself, what are the systems that you need to connect to? What are the interfaces that you need to connect your software to? And what are the service providers? So this is really about kicking ass and taking names, as I say. Find out who you need to hunt down and then get there. Right, so that was the 3 objectives. Now it's time for a poll. Let me put that on quickly for you. So the second poll of today is really asking you, which principles do you expect to increase the efficiency of your daily work routine the most? I already made a little post about that this morning in LinkedIn. Basically, yeah, you can tell us what you think about the principles. And while you do that, we move on very fast. I see. Yeah, start smaller. Also, okay, let's see. We'll have that going on the side. Let me take a sip of water. Okay, now the methods. This is really the most hands-on part, and yeah, so let's get into this. The first method I would like to talk about today is the evolution planner. I call it evolution planner. And this is really about mapping your evolution, the evolution of your business. This is really about the future of you, the potential of your company, and it's about getting your aims right. So I have a little quote here. A fancy fella called Douglas Merrill has been kind of big at Google back in the days. Nevertheless, what this is about, really, it's about talent, saying data is dumb. So what you need is you need talent, you need smart people, because if you want to change and develop, you basically need to hire people that are better than you. And that's something not too many people do yet, but it's very important because it's the only way to grow, or it is a way to grow. Other than that, you have to become the better version of yourself, which is also always great, but it helps to have people around you that are great in what they do. So therefore, that is a good quote to start with. And what should be the goals? What are the results for this? What could you apply with this framework? Then what should you achieve? First one, define your lack of knowledge. Yeah, know what you don't know. And then get great talent in-house that helps you to fill that void. So that is the first point about this. Second point is steering your development. So really have laser focus on the experimentation. When you apply the principle above, then you can really look at what kind of area, what expertise you want to develop. And then the last one, innovate, really focus on speed and product, because in digital and B2B, that is of course key. And the more you manage to develop a digital mindset, the more you will actually be able to deliver on that. So that is something really worth to keep in mind, especially when starting new from a green field. So to say, if you start your own company, it's a great thing. Startups have as an angle, a key edge over corporates for sure. They can start from scratch, have their own culture, their own structure that they set up and go from there. So that is something where you can really gain speed and set your structures right. Because here is the thing, there is 3 stages. I mean, you can cut it as many as you want, but I cut it now in 3 stages of digital evolution. And the first stage, that is, well, the no digital expansion plan stage, right? And that will soon be over. Those people will die, but that is basically the stage where you have maybe a website and even a newsletter, but that is totally separated. So you don't have that connected. The data is sitting in silos and it has nothing to do with each other. And so that is kind of like the Fahrschule Wenzel around the corner. These kind of guys, that's the no digital expansion plan stage 0. Second one, or first stage, then really is where most people are. This is really, most companies are actually sitting here. That means you have an integrated digital marketing unit. For example, you have digitization happening within the company, but only in a certain part. So it's not happening in the whole company, but it's happening in certain edges in departments, and they then might use also data, for example, to customize, even to target, and if very advanced, to predict. But nevertheless, this is only happening in one part of the company. So this is the stage 1. I have the BMW Niederlassung Berlin here as an example, because I mean, these people target you on Facebook, and so I had to put them in. Now, stage 2, that is of course already more interesting. We're almost at the top now. So that's a kind of Lyft and Ubers. That's where digital transformation happens across company. These people actually do innovation based on data and business intelligence, and have internal and external data sets that they use for that. So that is something where you have to have already a certain kind of structure in place, and also some intelligence in order to be able to do that. And of course, that is something that is harder the bigger your company is, but nevertheless, it's good to have a clear aim about that and to know what you can do with this. There's maybe even another participant in the market, in the new mobility market, that's really trying to do that. That is Volkswagen. If they let these do it, who knows what's going to happen there? But they are at least trying to get there, and that's what they say, and that's also what we can see in their products and overall activities. Now, on the top of the pyramid is then, in that case, I make a simple example. Tesla, that's just, of course, examples to make it more tangible. Tesla, on the other hand, is really a leader. So that is somebody that is really using data for innovation across sectors and continuously delivers class-leading innovation. And that is really interesting. So those people do not stick to one sector, not to one product or one target group. They might actually be able to pivot a lot. Look at what Airbnb did in the last 6 months, how they changed their entire business model and even managed to go to the stock. And that is what you can do if you have a digital at heart company and if you're able to really use the data at hand for innovation purposes. And so this is something you should start early, because if you do not start early, then it might be hard to get back into this, or the bigger the company, the harder it's to change the structures. And therefore, it's something you want to implement from the very beginning. Right, so what is the goals? What can you apply with this? Well, basically, you should be able to define your target. Like, who do you want to hire? What are the talents that you need? What are the resources? What are the processes that you need to implement in your company? And so who are you actually looking for, and who might not be your primary target? Second, then again, of course, steer. Really look at where do you want innovation to happen? What is the areas where you need to get better, or where you want to get better, where you see potential, and then innovate and really try and focus on speed and product. So everybody wonders how that could happen, and that's exactly that. That's potential, right? So that's what I was talking about. You there have the opportunity, the potential to really get better if you have that in place, and you can see it on this little examples here that, Elon Musk believes next killer product is going to be solar roof from 2021 on. And that makes sense if you look at what they've been like launching this year, but also by the side they launch a Model 2. I mean, we don't have to talk about it. But many people wonder, is Tesla actually a car company, or is it actually a battery company? And did they plan that from the beginning or not? So this is digital evolution, the ability to do these kind of things. So the principle to apply here really is fail faster. So really try to cut it down into little pieces and then iterate, test, and get better, so that you are able to climb up that ladder and really develop your company towards the goal of being a digital innovation leader. And therefore, you need to have digital at the core in all the processes and everything that's happening in your company. And that's why this little framework is helpful to really get your focus straight. Now, the second part, the second methodology for today, disruption planner. Yes, that's a bit of a clickbait title, I know, and I hate that, but well, it does the job. So really the subtitle is more important here. It's about imitation barriers. Imitation barriers. What are imitation barriers? Imitation barriers really just means the competition cannot just do like you. There is something that holds them back. They cannot just copy you. And that is something we want to look at a little bit with this disruption planner. This is what you can learn from that. And that's why I put it out, even if it's such a, overused and many times wrongly used term. So the first thing really about this is that disruption is not innovation, and innovation is not disruption, right? It might be innovative, but that's not the same. So really important here, we have a fellow Mark Anderson, and that is the founder of Netscape, and he said software is eating the world. That is basically just saying that digital will continue to move in other industries and transform the way they work. That's what I was mentioning before with my experience in the new media and advertising and communication sector. Everybody knows that, Netflix and so on. So the potential of software and digital is huge. And innovation nowadays, many times actually comes more from the customer side than from the companies. So you need to be ready to have your ear open there. Now, the goals of this planner really is 25/5, your network. Who is really important, right? What is really important? again, my favorite saying of today, kicking ass and taking names. Know who you want to talk to and what you want to focus on. So this is 25.5 and the potential of your endeavors. Then be realistic, stop dreaming, challenge your scope and market size of your future enterprise. Think about it. What is the potential that it holds, and is it actually worth the invest, or maybe not? Or should you question that a bit? And therefore be hard with yourself, and that's what this is about. Last but not least, bet safe, know your ports. So also good to know a little bit about potential trajectories of your business development. What is along the way, what might be somewhere else, outside in, inside out, and so on. And therefore, this is what we can do with this. So let's look into it. Everybody knows the business model canvas. 9-part is already a great tool. And the guys who did that made a follow-up on the most central part, which is the value proposition. Now, they made a book on that, and this is the 4-part business model. So this is what I'm referring to here. One of the things, as mentioned before, I got across at my studies at the Columbia Business School. So there is 4 parts, of course, the value proposition and the profit formula. So the profit formula saying, how are you actually able to make that, to sell that, to make people pay for what you're offering? And that's kind of the obvious part that has been talked about a lot. But the question is, how do you create that value? So who are the key resources and the key processes? What are the key processes that need to be put in place in order to enable you to create that unseen new digitized value? And that is something that's really worth taking a closer look at. So let's do that now on the next slide. Basically, here, everybody knows value proposition. We talk about what you offer to your customers. But then on the other side, the value network, that's the people, partner, assets that enable you to create, deliver, and earn revenue from it. So how can we improve that, and how can we understand that better? That is the question, and this is what we want to take a little bit of a closer look with this nice 2-part disruptive test. So this is based on the 4-part business model I was showing before. Now with disruption, as I said before, it's not innovation. So the difference is there's an incumbent in a market, and the disruptor is entering and offering something that is far greater value. It's not easily copyable. So, right, everybody knows analog cameras, digital cameras. Yeah, that's a big thing. The thing an iPhone can do nowadays, it's very hard to get it in an analog machine. So therefore, that is just something you cannot copy so easily. So that's just important to understand what is really the incumbent of the market. Who is the one that's supposed to be disrupted? For example, with self-driving cars, it's not the car manufacturers that are going to be disrupted, but potentially more the poor taxi drivers. And so that's really about that understanding who is the inhabitant or incumbent, and how can you raise your barriers so they cannot imitate you anymore. So the 2-part test is really just asking 2 questions. We have the value proposition and the value network. Now, the question that you have to ask yourself first, is the offer, your value proposition, is it really radically displacing the value that's already in the market, or is it just a little bit better? So that is something that is relevant, because it just shows the scope of potential. And that's also why so many people look for startups that have software and hardware in it, because then it's just harder to copy. But this is really something you can take a close look at yourself in the mirror and ask yourself, is this a radically displaced value or a little bit of an innovation? The second part is, what are your barriers to innovation? So how do you actually stop your competitors to imitate you, to do just like you and offer the same product, maybe at even a cheaper price point? So that is what you want to look at. And therefore, there are some principles in place: the value proposition generators and the value network components. Now, those are really, that's not a sufficient list. You could even extend it, but it's just to get your creative juice a bit going and think about what is it that makes those things fly. So on the value proposition side, we have things like personalization, aggregation, unbundling, integration, and of course, social. So as a back channel, there's potential of interaction and engagement. And that is something that is really relevant because it's offering personalization, it's offering, well, attachment, and it's offering a lot of other potentials that might not be there yet in other companies in the market. And there's also companies we can see that basically embrace that. And I mean, there is companies in the e-mobility sector that focus really on the added value benefit, kind of like the collecting points when you're charging and getting you like a community building around that. So that's something interesting because it's really working best with digital and hasn't been made yet. Then on the other side, the value network, that's also really interesting. Customer participation, right? Integration into your innovation process. That are processes you can nowadays do that you couldn't be doing before. There's like software tools coming out to get that in a regular basis, to get input from your target group. And so that's definitely something you want to do to get a stimuli for your business model development, focus groups, and so on, but also channel partners who can give you growth, like reach, who is there that actually makes your offer more accessible to others. And then also, who are key partners for value creation? So is there somebody you can add and therefore offer something that has not been offered before, or that gives you a unique position, something that has not been offered before? Combining different qualities and different options here and layering on top of each other is something that's also many times done with that stack approach that my colleague Paul was also talking about in Mars. So yeah, then revenue partners. Yeah, is there somebody that might help you to get a very cheap price, or to really help you like really flood a market, as my colleague Thomas many times says, spring flood markets? So how do you do that? What are the cost structures behind that? And how do you actually create network effects? So last but not least, again, data. That is something we have been talking about before, so I'm not going to dive into this again. But something I want to highlight, of course, is customer intimacy and customer obsession. Those are two things that are most, well, not only in B2C, but that's the markets that move first there. And the customer obsession is something you might want to take a look at, because that's really what Amazon did, and what, for example, Gorilla is right now doing with, like, they're delivering in 10 minutes groceries to your door, also only powered by e-bikes. That's how they're able of doing that, but also some other places that some other elements in their value creation process that actually helps them deliver that. So there are interesting examples around that. And so this is the principle here to bring it down. The results that you should be able to achieve with this is, again, 25/5 network, to grow on the right side, to get the right people on board, to get to know the right people, and to know where you want to look at when you want to connect and partner. Then be realistic about your offering. What is your realistic market size? And is it actually worth the efforts? And last but not least, know your ports. What might be other options on the table if things don't work out the way that you planned, because that's what happens most of the times. And that's why this is quite relevant, of course, too. Now I have a little bit of a kind of a tiny example here. That's just funny. I found it funny because that's something that happened to me just a few days ago. I actually did something. I got myself a smart contract for my energy provider. And funny enough, that's an energy provider that I used to be working for before in my career. And therefore, that's interesting what happened afterwards, because I was impressed about what the startup from the Nordics did there. They really made me cancel my energy contract and get a new one within 3 minutes on my app. And everything was done, set. And I didn't have to worry about it anymore. And there was additional value to it. So that's a great example of a company that's doing quite well. And then what happened afterwards, I found it funny, so I have to show you here, is what happened in my inbox. There was the one email that basically welcomed me as a new client. I was impressed. And then there's the other email that didn't even show the logo. But then, of course, they want to offer me something. And I click on that because I want to find out what happens. I go on their website. And first of all, I have a big exclamation mark telling me that this is not safe. And second, well, it just doesn't load. There's nothing happening, right? So I end up not having anything. It's a dead end. And that is just really what's happening currently in that market. There are like competitors entering with a great offer, and there are old inhabitants really slow. And that is just funny because, I mean, we had a board meeting with that with the board leader back then, and it was about the new campaign that we prepared for them. They didn't take it. And they mentioned that the biggest fear back then, that was in 2016, was Nest, right? So that people could actually manage their own electricity from home and buy from whoever they want, right? And that was in 2016. And now look at that. Tibber is there and you can do it, right? Everything is there and you can just do it. And they even have more added values and more smart connected elements in it. So that's an interesting example of what's happening in the market and companies actually applying those principles. Now, what do you want to do with this? Is a big principle again. It's complicated. So what you want to start smaller on that, right? That's why it's good to have these little frameworks to really know, okay, what do you want to look at? There is like your value network and there's your value proposition and there's a few generators that might help you to actually innovate on that and propel your own offer forward. So that was the disruption planner. And now we are at the second poll of the day. No, that was the third. Yeah, actually, right. So let me look at the watch. We have about 15 minutes left. Yeah, I wanted you to choose between the following, but actually I decide now that we don't do this because we will run out of time. So I'm just going to decide for you guys, and I'm going to go for the target planner, which is this one, because I just think it's better right now. Why is that? It's because it's bringing the two other ones, the two methods I showed before together. And the other one, the value planner, that's more of really a sophisticated framework we can dive into also later. If you have questions, ask me about it, or if you have some spare time, we can maybe even like go a bit longer and have a look on that. It's all there. But now the target planner is really bringing the evolution and the disruption planner together. And here the aims is really nice quote, and I like this face too. Yogi Berra: if you don't know where you are going, you'll end someplace else. Right? That's important. So better know where you're going, and therefore this is important. So be clear about what you want. Yeah, know yourself, and if you do, then stand tall, because that's important. It's important to really be brave and know where you want to go and what your focus is and what is not. Also, in terms of what my colleague Thomas said in his first Fastlane, is the Schweizer Taschenmesser approach, or failure of many companies nowadays, especially in that was the example of the EV charging market. But that is something that happens, I guess, to every startup. It happens that you have to get somewhere the money to survive, and then there might be a big corporate coming with a problem, and they basically asking you to work as a software development house, and you end up developing a lot of things that are not on your roadmap and don't help you at all. So to avoid that, it's good to know what your target is, and also know your second choices and your no-go zones. So identify the crucial interfaces along the value chain, as I call it. Where is it where you actually want to grow your knowledge, where you want to grow your expertise, and what are areas that are not at all relevant to you, especially if you want to get very sharp in that market. So steer across the storm, be persistent, partner smart, and keep your head high. That is really what this target planner is supposed to help you with. And now let's dive into it and have a look. So first, this is really just saying also a reflection on what Thomas said, the blade versus the Swiss Army knife. Yeah, so the blade is the one solution offer that has a subset of a target customer. So it's very sharp and very specific and probably very good in what it does. So that's a company that's highly specialized and delivers extreme good on that. Something like the example we had before. So that is a blade. And then the next development step, if you want to call it development or something else more complex, is a system. So you don't have just one solution in place, but several solutions that actually stack on top of each other, ending in a range of solutions and subsequently a set of target customers. So that is something that you have most of the common, well, for example, my ex company had that, of course, where you have several solutions in place. And you also serve maybe a broader market. Now, the final thing, something that's more and more shown now, actually, or maybe actually able anyway, there is companies aiming for an end-to-end solution approach, and that's really what I call armies. So end-to-end solutions with a whole sector of target customers trying to sell directly end-to-end to them and owning the whole value train around that. So that is the army. Of course, the army is a bit more complex and harder to achieve. And so you cannot start as an army, but then again, it's not necessarily the most value one. So you might have a lot of expenses on the army side. Same with the system. Whereas with the blade thing, your value benefit ratio might be actually better. Also, when looking for potential exit scenarios. So this is something that's interesting to become a specialist in the field. So this is really what we said before. So I'm going to cross through that quickly. Now, what does that mean? As an example, how do you use that planner? You use it by saying, okay, I am a blade and I have one specific solution in place, and now I want to add a second offer, a second value proposition. I have something else that I think should be really offered. And if we do that, we're going to increase our offer so much that it's really worth of taking that and delivering on that and innovating that, because then the next step, we might actually be able to move to offer a system approach. So we might increase the area of customers that we are able to offer to sell to, because we are not just having one offer but two offers of different market shares and different target customers, and therefore we can actually develop our company like that and move towards becoming a system. So that's one thing you can do, and if you do that, then of course that's basically your trajectory. So that's your market trajectory. You are moving from your specialized knowledge company area. You're basically moving inside out into another company area. So I have another example around that. What does that actually mean? But what you do is you start from a subset of customers, and then you expand into an incumbent customer base, and you offer your solution there, and you actually take away customers from them. And that's how you then grow your market share. And you can see what is the market size that you're getting there. Is it maybe niche? Is it split market? Or is it potentially landslide? Depending on your offer, really. So if you have that mapped out, then you will know where's your no-go areas. Your no-go areas is everywhere where we don't have that highlighted area. And you will know how to 25-5 your focus, what is really important. What kind of companies do you want to work with, and what kind of companies do you actually want to be in 5 years' time? So that is that. And now again, the summing up of what you can do with this. You can know yourself, stand tall because you know what you want. You learn to say no, which is what you really have to learn a lot, especially when you're a startup with limited resources. You will identify the crucial interfaces with potential other customers in the market. Look at your value chain. The value chain, that's the other methodology I didn't present yet, but that's just no time for that today. Or maybe if we take overtime, or you just ask me about that. That's really about this, identifying the parts on the value chain, the interfaces between companies, between sectors that might be worth for you looking at it, and then understanding that these are the crucial interfaces between companies, or at the end, maybe also between customers or applications that you really want to position yourself and you want to occupy. And then be persistent and get the right partners. So just an example to make that a bit more tangible. We've seen that, of course, the first plug and charge, a fast charger of the world, park and walk away. So that is just more convenient, right? It makes sense. And that's also what Object did, to develop this new unit around plug and charge. And now they're really starting to get a bit of growth, and also other participants on the market. I mean, we had this interview with Dr. Mark Moulton, talking about ISO 1511820 and all the features that they planning to implement there. Also, like the contactless and the seamless. So there is technological and development that then actually shifts the potential and change the value chain, like who's actually then able to charge whom for what. And maybe you're going to be cut out of the market, you're going to be disintermediated, or you're going to be intermediate. So that's really an example for intermediation. So putting yourself somewhere in and having additional value for the customer at the end. So to make that simple, I have a metaphor for that, basically inside out. What does that mean? That means taking someone's girlfriend, steal someone's girlfriend. It's a bit nasty, but that's basically what it is. You go in and you take away from others. And there are examples around that in the market that are not just from the EV charging sector, but also in the mass sector. And there has been a lot of development lately. Few participants offered marketplaces approaches. So that is really interesting that the market is now grown up enough to offer that. And it makes a lot of sense if you're capable of doing that. The question is then, of course, how do you get there? And there we again, before with the interfaces, where do you want to offer what in order to grow sufficiently step by step your offer to then at the end maybe be able to offer a marketplace. And that's what my colleague Frank always calls RP-centered platforms. So you want to maybe also think about that. It's a different example. But the customer obsession is something I already mentioned before. And last but not least, one idea, just how about combining the two of them, right? If you combine the Blade System Army approach to the 1, 2, 3 level of digital innovation, you might actually be able to map out your development even more precise. So that means that you learn that it might be okay to actually get a system that's not so much digital ready if you are, on the other hand, capable of having a certain subset or a specific offer that grows a part of your company, because then from this part of the company, again, you can innovate the rest of the company. So always look in segments and stages to move forward there. So that is really what I want to say here. That means play smarter is the principle to apply to that. Choose your battles and only fight when you know you're going to win. So that is basically it. That means we are kind of at the end of the show now. We're going to move on and look at the results. So the results of today were 3 principles, 3 objectives, and 3 methods that I'm going to summarize quickly here. The objectives, again, for the digital sophisticated, digitized value propositions. What potential does digital hold? Where do you need to do something or other people will disrupt your market? What are your original value network components? How do you actually grow them? How do you make sure that this is creating stronger, bigger, and better? And then finally, what are the touch points that you're able to occupy? Again, that's something that you can really learn when you're taking a look at the methodology I didn't present today, unfortunately. So the value planner, but then we can talk about this another time. Anyway, so the methods today was target planner, evolution planner, and disruption planner. The principles start smaller, fail faster, and get smarter. And what is relevant about this is that you can actually apply them on each other, so they interfere with each other. You can now use this, as I already said, the start smarter applied on the digitized value proposition, and therefore find out what kind of area you want to focus on to get innovation going. And yeah, that's that. And now we are really at the end here. Last poll. How do you judge today's return of time invest? Let me put that up for you. And then here we are. I'm happy to get your feedback about that. Also, if there are questions, you can post them. I mean, we have 2 minutes left. It's kind of sharp, but nevertheless, thank you. It was really great time, and I hope it was a little bit interesting and not too generic. You can always dive deeper on any kinds of those topics. So if you're interested, let me know. Just remember, kicking ass and taking names. That's what all is about, and being smart. So really, here it's about the end. So thank you again. Be kind to each other. It's Christmas coming up, and it's one planet, one love.